Greetings and welcome back to Room 303 in Freshman English. We continue in our work of Romeo and Juliet in Act 4 in our MyPerspectives volume. We're on page 504 and following. Now guys, we're going to look at what is called literary criticism. Now, sometimes we use this word criticism and you think that what we're saying is always saying what's really wrong or whatever, and it's kind of like a mean thing. But literary criticism is not like that at all. Literary criticism rather likes to look at a work of text, a play, for example, Romeo and Juliet, and to ask questions about why it works or why it doesn't work, and what are the elements that make it work or not work. I'm with you now. We're going to look at two of these. The first one of these is Rosenberg's Romeo and Juliet's a terrible play, and David Laveau can't change that. That's the title of that one. I'm with you on page 505. Now, let's learn a little bit about Alyssa Rosenberg. She was born in 1984. She attended Yale University. She's contributed to many publications, including the New York Times, New York Beast, the Daily Beast, the New Republic, as well as Salon. She's been the cultural editor at thinkprogress.com, a columnist at womeninhollywood.com, and a pop culture blogger at the Washington Post. Now, the background for this one is in her critique on 505. In her critique of David Laveau's 2013 production of Romeo and Juliet, Rosenberg discusses the level of immaturity displayed by the characters in Shakespeare's original play and how the play holds up when viewed with modern sensibilities. Let's go ahead now, turn to page 506. We'll listen to professional reader, we'll read, then we'll annotate at levels 1, 2, and 3.
Romeo and Juliet is a terrible play, and David Laveau can't change that, by Alyssa Rosenberg. A new interracial production of Romeo and Juliet arrives on Broadway this September, starring Orlando Bloom and Condola Rashad. Director David Laveau decided to cast the lovers' families in alignment with their races, resulting in a much more diverse production. So why am I not cheering? Because despite the fact that its latest staging features a 36-year-old actor and a 26-year-old actress, Romeo and Juliet, a play about children, is full of terrible, deeply childish ideas about love. And as much as I want to see more interracial couples in pop culture and more diverse casts on stage and screen, I don't want to see them cast in material that is so horribly depressing. Romeo and Juliet itself hasn't aged well. The story follows Juliet Capulet, who is 13 when she meets Romeo Montague at a party, falls head over heels in love with him, and marries him within a day of meeting him. Romeo's age isn't specified in the play, but the quickness with which he throws over a former flame for Juliet doesn't suggest a particularly mature man. Maybe this works on the page, when we're not forced to watch actors and actresses who are clearly in their 20s and 30s behave like early teenagers. But the effect is embarrassing and unsettling for today's theater audiences, perhaps already fretting over suspended adolescents and stunted millennials. Update the play to match the aged-up actors in the two main roles, and the plot still doesn't make a lot of sense. Why are the families fighting? What was the inciting incident? The absence of a reason does mean that adaptations can fill in space that Shakespeare left behind, making the warring parties Puerto Rican and Polish American, for instance, or Israeli and Palestinian. But even then, having the two lovers kill themselves through a series of misunderstandings doesn't translate well in a setting that takes any sort of modern communications for granted. And it's hard to believe the couple, no matter how lovelorn, would lack the patience to wait 24 hours to get hitched, not to mention the savvy to check up on a bad report from Verona. But beyond that, the vision of Romeo and Juliet's deaths uniting their families is an adolescent fantasy of death solving all problems. Won't they miss me when I'm gone? Pout. There's a reason that, in the best modern riff on Romeo and Juliet, West Side Story, Maria lives after Tony's death to shame the Sharks and the Jets, her survival a seal on the truce between them. Dying is easy. Living to survive the consequences of your actions and to do the actual work of reconciliation is the hard part. An interracial Romeo and Juliet is nice, but black actors and actresses deserve richer roles than Romeo and Juliet.
Okay, let's turn now to Rosenberg's critique. Notice that the critique is by and large two levels. The first is an observation that a new performance is about to be presented in theater, and that you're going to have a white Romeo and a black Juliet, and so interracial is the term. And so this Rosenberg suggests this is a good thing. She wants to see more of this as a commentator on popular American culture. What she has problems with is the idea that the play Romeo and Juliet deserves the serious attention that is being given, especially by adult actors. It almost seems as if she believes that the play might be better served if actually young people, real children, were to be playing the roles of Romeo and Juliet. Notice she begins by talking first about the age, then she comments at the conclusion of paragraph 2 that the material is quote-unquote horribly depressing. Now, no question, we've made this observation in our lectures. However, clearly there's a whole lot of Romeo and Juliet where there is comic relief. We talked about that in our lectures at learnstrong.net. But for Rosenberg, this is a depressing play through and through. She then in paragraph 3 will give us a brief summary, and she suggests that Romeo, although a little bit older than Juliet, is not particularly a very mature person as well, right? And then she says in the end that the effect of watching adults play this role is in fact embarrassing, and she says, quote, unsettling for today's theater audiences, perhaps already fretting over suspended adolescents and stunted millennials. A little bit of irony in the use of the word stunted, we might say. The interesting argument that she's making is that us as adults, and I'm now including you even as freshmen in high school as part of that now for this discussion, kind of embarrassed by the way that this play unfolds. Human beings don't behave in this way, and so watching this happening is kind of embarrassing. This is, I think, a really interesting idea when we do our viewing activities to ask, when you watch the different performances that we show, the Zeffirelli film version, the Leonardo DiCaprio, Claire Danes version, is it in fact embarrassing for you to watch these kinds of things unfold being portrayed by these actors, or do you in fact get kind of wrapped up in the play? Obviously, and this is what makes criticism so much fun, obviously, guys, there's a counter-argument to this. We're not so much right now wanting to make a counter-argument. What that would be a 3B observation. We're just looking at what it is that she says. Notice in paragraph 4, she's going to tell us that the plot doesn't make a lot of sense, and that in fact the whole premise of this is kind of silly. We never find out, for example, why the Capulets and the Montagues are fighting, right? We have no sense of that whatsoever. We do have, of course, the idea at the end of the play that the two lovers would kill themselves, right, through a series of misunderstandings. But she says that it, quote, doesn't translate well in a setting that takes any sort of modern communications for granted. It's hard to believe, for example, she says that the couple, no matter how forlorn, would lack the patience to wait 24 hours to get hitched. That is to say, there has to have been more intelligence on the part of everybody involved. Finally, and this is a fascinating argument, because from the very beginning of the play, and we've commented on this in our lectures, a pair of star-crossed lovers take their life, but then the following line in that prologue suggests that with their death, bury their parents' strife. That is to say, the death of Romeo and Juliet finally leads to the end of the feud. Rosenberg makes the argument that that's in fact just childish fantasy, what she will call an adolescent fantasy of death solving all problems, a won't they miss me when I'm gone pow. We know this from our study of Mark Twain's Tom Sawyer as well, where Tom fantasizes about he'll die and then everyone will know. It's what all children, kind of imagine at some point in their life as a way to even the score. She says, dying is easy, living to survive the consequences of your actions and to do the actual work of reconciliation is the hard part. Obviously, the mentioning of the classic West Side Story, a text that we speak of as well in our comments on Romeo and Juliet, is one more rendering of this idea of the tension between the two. Now, of course, at 3B, now we'll go there. the obvious question is, do you agree with this or not? That is to say, can you suspend disbelief, as we've commented on in our lectures, enough to be able to say, well, yeah, I hear what Rosenberg is saying, but when you look at the way human beings actually behave, and not just children, you see that humans make some very interesting irrational decisions, especially when there's familiar conflict involved or when there is emotive love involved. Well, we're now going to turn to the second of our two criticisms in defense of Romeo and Juliet. Let's go there and see what our thoughts are about that one. Thank you.